Greetings everyone and welcome to the virtual office hours. By now you should know, my name is John Fia. I chair the history department here at Messiah and teach American history. Our producer Abby Blakeney, as usual, behind the camera. We have the founding fathers with us. I don't know if you guys noticed last episode, the George Washington Pez dispenser had been replaced by a George Washington bobblehead. I don't know how many of you noticed this, but no one commented on it or emailed me about it. I received this last week from Megan Piet. Some of you remember her, our former virtual office hours producer. She sent this to me. She got it at Colonial Williamsburg. So we're going to keep the bobblehead up here for a while, and then maybe one day I'll put the Pez back, the Pez, George Washington Pez dispenser. Although I'd be happy to accept gifts of bobbleheads for all the other founding fathers too, for some of you loyal viewers who are looking to contribute to the program. Anyway, we are discussing the idea that America is founded or was founded as a Christian nation. We've been talking about this in light of the second edition of my book, Was America Founded as a Christian Nation, which we hope is coming out hope to be out this summer, this coming summer. We're working our way through American history and looking at the ways in which Americans have understood the United States to be a Christian nation. And we're finally making our way into the 20th century, but before we do that, today I want to talk about a Supreme Court case that is often brought up by those, we'll call them Christian nationalists, who want to argue that the United States is a Christian nation. And that is the 1892 Holy Trinity Church versus the United States case. Now, again, many people will appeal to this case because specifically in this case, Justice David Brewer, who writes the majority opinion in this case, in that opinion he states that the United States is a Christian nation, and we'll get to that here in a second. Now, let me just give you a little bit of the background. The Holy Trinity case is directly connected to an 1885 Immigration Act, which prohibited companies and businesses from paying for laborers to come into the United States, immigrant laborers to come into the United States and work for their companies. This was directly related, and when the Congress passed this law, this Immigration Act, it was directly related. They had the Chinese, in other words, in mind, Chinese immigrants. So with that law in mind, in 1887, Holy Trinity Church, which is this historic church, Anglican Episcopal church located in the southern tip of Manhattan, decided that they were going to hire a new minister. That minister's name was E. Walpole Warren. He was from England, and they paid Warren's way to come over to Holy Trinity, to candidate for the position, and then to when his family moved over here, Holy Trinity paid the cost. Well, this case went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court had to decide whether or not Holy Trinity's decision to pay their minister, who was technically an immigrant, violated the 1885 immigration law. To make a long story short, when this case got to the Supreme Court, it was decided that the 1885 immigration law does not apply to ministers. It does not apply to churches seeking ministers from other countries. And the common understanding of that 1885 law was that this was a law that applied to manual laborers. And again, the sort of unwritten rule here was that it applied to Chinese manual laborers who were coming into the country, particularly in the West. So Brewer writes the majority opinion. And in that opinion, he makes several other points about the nature of the United States. So, for example, let me just read you some of the quotes coming out of Brewer's decision. Brewer says that, quote, "No purpose of action against religion can be imputed to any legislation, state or national, because this is a religious people." So in other words, when you're talking about ministers coming over to provide spiritual services for a religious people, this doesn't pose a threat to the United States or to native workers who are going to have their jobs threatened by these Chinese immigrants. But then Brewer goes on. Brewer concludes that these and many other matters which might be noticed add a volume of unofficial declarations to the mass of organic utterances that is a Christian nation. So again, in this decision, Brewer says that the United States is a Christian nation. What's fascinating about this is he then takes to the lecture circuit after this and begins giving a lecture about all around the country about America being founded as a Christian nation. He appeals to Christopher Columbus coming over for Christian purposes. He refers to the references to God and providence in the Declaration of Independence. Brewer is careful to note that he is not saying that Christianity should be the established religion, because he knows that would violate the First Amendment. But what he is saying is that Christianity should in some way be privileged, that historically Americans have always been a Christian nation, and we should think of it in that way. He even at one point says that the U.S. legal code is rooted in the laws of Moses and the teachings of Jesus Christ. Now, what's fascinating about this is, one, this Supreme Court case is often used by Christian America proponents. What's also fascinating is that Brewer is basically articulating some of the same arguments that people like David Barton and other Christian nationalists today are putting forth. This argument has a long history in America. So hopefully we set you straight on this. This is not a specific Supreme Court case revolving around the idea that America is a Christian nation. It's a case about immigration in which this phrase Christian nation happens to be used. So again, shoot me emails with questions about this. This is gets a little bit complicated, but hopefully you'll get the gist of what I'm trying to say. We will see you next week, and we'll finally dive into the 20th century. See you then.